Conversations here might flow anywhere. One might hear of discoveries of an ancient city, a new ecosystem, an unknown tribe, strange monkeys or birds, or things that simply seemed unbelievable. We all shared a childlike enthusiasm for exploration and adventure. We bonded quickly, each of us anxious to listen to the adventures of others and to share stories of our own as well. This was the South American Explorers Club, or SAEC as I will refer to it, an American-based organization with clubhouses also in Peru, Ecuador, and later Argentina. The club facilitated research and exploration of South America. These included the subjects of biology, geography, anthropology, archaeology, and others. The organization also supported extreme or adventurous travel. Had Indiana Jones lived during the end of the 20th century, he would have belonged. The stories of its members were like listening to Indiana Jones himself speak. I belonged for many years to support my trips around the continent. In my adult life, I have never really enjoyed networking organizations, especially in my business career, but this was something different. Each day I hung out at the SAEC in Lima, Peru, was like Christmas morning as a young boy. Giddy is the only emotional word I can think of to describe my time there, and it was constant. The conversations were some of the most enjoyable of my life. To listen to other members talk about their discoveries was like reading the most profound of fictional literature. Many of these discoveries have, for some reason, not made it to the general public. Maybe it is just the public's lack of interest. I visited the SAEC several times, and had I lived close, I could see visiting it daily. I was also invited on quite a number of the most adventurous trips and explorations I have heard of. These trips were often to places no Westerner had visited before the discoverer. I realized that if I made these trips, there would be a serious price to pay. That is, serious illnesses would be a given. Poisonous insect bites would be certain. Some plants could be deadly by touch. And who knows what else lurked in the unexplored world of various parts of South America. The SAEC provided opportunities that were not unlike those provided to the famous explorers of the 15th through 19th century Europe. One archaeologist told me of evidence from the fabled city of El Dorado. These explorers were living legendary lives. The mindset of members was that anything was possible and could be done. Everyone there had an indestructible mindset. The belief was that anything was survivable. During those times, I had it too. You had to. Otherwise, you would not have survived. One mindset example was British mountain climber Norman Croucher, who was a double amputee, missing both of his natural legs that had been replaced by aluminum ones. To listen to him speak, one might suspect he was trying to convince others that having their legs amputated was a huge advantage while climbing up in the high mountains, and that amputation is something they should choose to do. I met an English biologist there, and we made plans to explore some of the thousands of miles of Inca trails made a few hundred years ago. One day, we agreed to meet at the SAEC to further discuss this. Neither of us could separately resist making the rounds to find out who else was there on that day. I ran into an older gentleman who had come from the high jungles of the Amazon. He was from the Inca tribe. He prided himself on visiting places no person has gone. He would disappear into the jungles for weeks or months at a time with few supplies. Unfortunately, my Spanish at the time was not very good. I would become fluent later through considerable effort. When the Inca man and I spoke, I more or less understood him. He talked about his explorations into uncharted territory. He then came to a new topic. His enthusiasm would increase. The topic was, as he called it, El Mundo Perdido, or the Lost World. SAEC has quite a collection of maps, and he took me to a book of maps on the high jungle of the Amazon in Peru. He showed its location on a map and said this was a place very special in the universe. His descriptions of this were rather abstract and difficult for me to understand, really otherworldly. It seemed like a journey into another dimension. His passion for the subject was as if he were describing the long-lost love of his life. As we were talking, an earthquake happened. A few hundred had been killed in Peru during that year from earthquakes, as Peru is always vulnerable to this. How appropriate while speaking for a moderate quake to hit. Devastation was not great, but I was nearly knocked to the floor. The Ashanika looked at me with a smile. He didn't have to say anything. I knew he believed the earthquake to be a sign that I must go to this place, as if the gods were speaking to me and telling me to do so. He told me to go and meet my soul. I recently looked up the earthquake and found it was only a 5.0, but the epicenter must have been close, and it must have been a shallow quake. As it was rolling, I could feel the building I was in swaying. I decided immediately I had to go experience Lost World. I called the biologist over, as he was fluent in Spanish. I explained to him what the indigenous man had said and asked him if he would be interested in going there. He spoke to the Ashanika man and was also quickly swayed to make the trip. We asked the Ashanika man if he wanted to go with us, but he was leaving the following day to explore the Bolivian part of the Pantanal wetlands. A couple of days later, the biologist and I would leave for several days of hiking. This would take us up to about 15,000 feet or 4,600 meters, through different Inca ruins and down into the cloud forest. I believe the lowest elevation we reached was about 5,000 feet or 1,500 meters in the high jungle of the Amazon. Of course, this included visiting Lost World. We were unable to reach the start of our hike until early evening, as there had been transportation problems, almost a given in Peru at the time. We hiked quickly, as we knew we had to cover some distance to arrive at the ruin where we wanted to stay the night. This is how Incas traveled several hundred years ago. They would stay at any of a large number of places that are now in ruins. I believe all these places were covered with roofs originally, but were not for us. We arrived late in the evening, having covered 10 to 12 miles or 16 to 19 kilometers. We quickly set up camp and ate. We were the only ones there, as the only way to get there was to use this obscure trail. The next morning, the plan was to rise early, as the intention was to hike something like 50 miles or 80 kilometers that day. We were both in very good shape, but we knew to cover that distance, we would have to walk quickly the whole day. It would also be a very long day of hiking. We would again probably stop around midnight. We both, instead of going to sleep right away, were talking about our enthusiasm for South America. A short time into that, the biologist had to go on a bathroom break. He came back a short time later and was able to say very little. His eyes were wide and he was disturbed. I then had to go. I was walking next to a wall made of rocks, a wall created by the Incas. The rocks, in my mind, began to move sideways. I was quickly questioning if this was really happening. I looked away. Had I fallen asleep and was dreaming? We hadn't been doing anything that would have altered our sobriety. I'm very careful about even having a beer in such cases, because I want all my senses to be fully aware. I looked again. The rocks continued to move. There were large rocks all around on the ground. Some of the rocks had fallen down from the ruins above. These rocks turned into animals. One of them then started running at me, and I quickly also started running and dove back into the tent. The biologist looked at me for an explanation of why I dove back into the tent. I looked at the biologist and said, "You won't believe what just happened to me." Before I could start, he began explaining what had happened to him when he left the tent. It was the same thing. I don't remember even a few seconds after that. I think, for some reason, we both passed out. Later, I asked people about what we saw. Locals told us that this sort of thing is what happens when such places are visited, which is the exact reason why one should not go there. While at SAEC, others explained extraordinary experiences as well. This brought down my confidence in trusting my senses while traveling through former Inca lands and jungles. Archaeologists have told me the Incas were masters at creating illusions. I also wonder if there were plants that grew around the ruins, which maybe released hallucinogens into the air to protect themselves. Biologists have told me trees have an awareness when an animal is near them that can harm them. There are a number of strategies to prevent this harm, or at least to lessen it. Would the Incas not have known to use such trees or plants to their advantage if they existed? They had the largest jungle in the world and numerous other non-jungle ecosystems at their disposal in choosing plants to do various things. In the next episode, I will continue to Mundo Perdido, or Lost World. If you enjoy the content and hearing about explorations around the world, please like, subscribe, and let others know. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.